or what little that's worth. Anyway, part of every path in the New Pathways program has an opportunity for a keynote speech. Presentation Mastery has a requirement for a keynote speech. So what really is a keynote speech? How do you structure this thing so you can make it work so that it really is a keynote speech and not just a, at the risk of offending people, a typical 7.5-minute speech that you've talked slowly so you could stretch it out for 20 minutes. That's not the intent of a keynote. Now, keynoting is a very interesting and important skill. This was difficult for me, and I'm being bluntly honest. I've been a full-time professional speaker for 21 years. I am, thank you. I am a trainer, and I'm a really good trainer. But training is a different skill than keynoting, and if you want to be successful in the accredited speaker program, you have to be a keynoter. You have to know how to keynote. So I don't know whether I should play the speech. I think I'm going to play the tape, and then we'll talk about the evolution of the speech, what I did, who helped me, how we put this thing together, and some interesting observations and things that I learned along my journey. So let's get this thing up and running. Where are you? Oh, come on. I don't want to share the desktop. Oh, yeah, you know. Here's what I've learned. Some days you are the windshield. Some days you're the bug. Guess what I am?
Sorry, Laverne did not have the right link. So.
Oh, well. There we go. Just pop that up. Go back to Kim. Now we'll try the share. There we go. So what you're going to see is you're going to see the speeches in its entirety, including the introduction. And the introduction really is a key part of the keynote, even though you actually don't deliver it, but you need to create it. So here we go. Enjoy.
Something's out for the screen.
Challenges that necessitates the need to initiate change in order to save money, improve processes, and fully engage staff in order to create a culture of continuous improvement. Our speaker today is a recognized change expert with 15 years leading total quality management initiatives at Transform Canada and over 21 years of experience leading change initiatives in healthcare organizations across the United States and Canada. He helps organizations establish self-sustaining lean cultures. He is the author of the Lean for Healthcare series and is a contributing author to the Keystones and Cornerstones series of books. He received his Lean Black Belt in Healthcare from the Institute of Industrial Engineers in 2011. Michael Bayer is a member of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, Toastmasters International, the Society of American Magicians, 4 airline frequent flyer clubs, 3 hotel reward programs, 2 car rental frequent driver programs, and Costco. Today, Michael will share some of his insights about lean and how it can transform our organizations regardless of our business. Please help me welcome Michael Bayer.
Enoch Hoffenmeyer is the Chief Financial Officer of a small, rural, critical access hospital in Southern Illinois. He's poring over his year-end financial statements in preparation of presenting them to his board. He has a variance he can't explain. He's checked the numbers twice and 3 times, and no matter where he looks, he can't figure out why. He has an unexpected, unexplained $1 million over budget profit. Who wouldn't love to explain that variance to their board of directors? Carolyn Marlock is the Materials Management Manager at a hospital in North Carolina. Her staff complained that the inventory management system they were using was both inefficient and ineffective. Supplies were being wasted because of expiry dates. Working with her staff, Carolyn developed a new inventory management system that reduced the amount of on-hand inventory and virtually eliminated expired supply waste, saving her hospital $350,000. Who wouldn't love to have a hardwired improvement process in their organization? Harry Selden is a phlebotomist at a hospital in Texas. So when Harry takes a blood draw, he would use a butterfly-shaped bandage. But Harry realized that these bandages were expensive. So he decided he would use a regular bandage unless circumstances dictated otherwise. In just 1 year, Harry saved his hospital $12,000 in bandage expenses. Who wouldn't love to have engaged employees like Harry on their staff? All of these savings were generated in small, rural, critical access hospitals, 25 beds or less, by clients that I have worked with who have developed successful, self-sustaining lean cultures of continuous improvement. So, what is lean? Well, folks, if you think that lean is a weight reduction program, you're in the wrong room. Well, first of all, lean is not an acronym. Lean merely describes the process of slimming down an organization, of eliminating waste, of improving processes, and creating a culture of continuous improvement. Lean is built on two basic principles. The first principle is nothing is done unless it's in response to the voice of the customer. The second principle is everything is done with respect. You don't do lean, you become lean. Lean is not slash and burn. Lean is not cutting staff and reducing. Lean is not a quick fix. Lean is a growth strategy. It's based on gaining market share by working smarter, not harder. So the inspiration for lean came to Taichi Ono, the father of lean and a Toyota engineer, from two sources. The first was the Ford Motor Company. So what did Henry Ford invent?
Assembly line.
No, not the car. Henry Ford invented the moving assembly line. So the worker would stand in one spot, the work would come to them, they would do their part, the work would move on, and more work would come to them in a continuous flow. The second inspiration came from Piggly Wiggly. Anyone here shop at Piggly Wiggly? My wife loves Piggly Wiggly. Whenever we drive south to North Dakota to shop, I guess you figured out I'm a Canadian, right? Yeah. Well, I always ask her, honey, where do you want to go shopping? And she always says, I want to go to Piggly Wiggly. But why do you want to go to Piggly Wiggly? She said, I think it's a funny name. But do you know the innovation that Piggly Wiggly brought to America? In 1916, Piggly Wiggly was the first store that allowed the customer to select their groceries. Before then, you would go in, you would tell the shopkeeper what you wanted, they would assemble and bag your groceries and hand you the bag. But Piggly Wiggly allowed the customer to select their groceries, virtually eliminating complaints about bruised fruit, dented cans, and almost expired dairy products. However, on hand that customers wanted to buy when the customer wanted to buy it. So you're asking yourself, how does a moving assembly line in an automobile factory and a self-service grocery store relate to healthcare? Well, think about the visit to an emergency room. The patient comes in, they register, they see a physician, they go for tests, they wait for results, a diagnosis is made, a care plan is developed and implemented, and then they're discharged. Now, at each step of this process, value is added by people providing a service to the patient. The challenge we have is we have to get the patient to flow smoothly through the process in a continuous flow, and to ensure that the service the patient needs is there when the patient needs it. If you've ever had to wait in a waiting room, you know that waiting is a waste of the patient's time. So, what really is waste? Waste is any activity that does not add value for the customer. And in healthcare, that is the patient. Waste includes all kinds of things, for instance, undue long wait times, being sent back to the lab for repeat tests because of lab errors, or showing up for a procedure only to find out that the procedure was canceled and the staff neglected to tell the patient. Now, waste is not the root. Now, waste is a symptom of a problem, not the root cause. Lean focuses on eliminating the root cause of waste. Dr. Don Burbick, the former CEO of the Institute of Healthcare Improvement, said, the level of waste in US healthcare is 50%. 50%. Imagine if we could just recoup 1%. What difference would that make to you and to your hospital? And ironically, the customer does not pay for waste. The hospital pays for waste by being less competitive. And the hospital can only gain that competitive edge back when it removes the waste. I recently interviewed a new nurse at a hospital client in Kansas. She told me that the biggest difference between her old job at her hospital and her job at the new hospital was the culture of continuous improvement. She told me that everyone is expected to look for opportunities to improve and then to make those changes happen. I asked her what her biggest challenge was. She told me her biggest challenge was knowing who was on call. She would spend at least an hour a day looking up names and phone numbers. Her innovation? At the start of her shift, she would sit down, she would create an on-call list, put it on the back of her employee badge. If she had to make a call during the day, she would grab her badge, look up the number, pick up the phone, and dial. She shared her innovation with her department. Now, at the beginning of every shift, someone is tasked with the responsibility of creating an on-call list and distributing it to everyone in the department. Now, that nurse and her colleagues can now spend that previously wasted time caring for their patients. Anyone here ever had an x-ray? Isn't it a great experience, right? They send you into a room. They say, take your clothes off. No, I'm not going to do that. Put on this gown. They bring you out and they lie you on the apparatus, which feels like a piece of sheet steel that has just come out of a freezer. They contort you in the most uncomfortable possible position and say, take a deep breath and don't move. And after what seems like an hour, they say, okay, you can get up and get dressed now. Well, needless to say, comments on patient satisfaction forms are not always complimentary. A group of radiology technologists at a hospital in Wyoming decided that they wanted to somehow enhance the patient experience when they came in for imaging. So using simple lean tools that they learned in training, they studied the layout of their department. Their solution was surprisingly simple. By moving just one machine, they reduced the amount of time the patient spent on the apparatus, greatly enhancing the patient experience. However, on the business side, the resultant savings of 45 minutes a day allowed them to take care of 2 more patients a day. It increased revenue with minimal increased expenses, and the staff was not as fatigued at the end of the day because of the new optimized layout. All benefits because they eliminated waste,
improve processes, and have a culture of continuous improvement. Now, I've been talking a lot about time and money, but it's not just about time and money. At a hospital in Nebraska, the dialysis unit is located at the front of the hospital. It has a separate entrance immediately adjacent to the main door of the hospital. There's parking spots in front of the unit, but these are prime parking spots and they're usually filled. This requires dialysis patients to sometimes walk long distances across the parking lot to come to the unit for treatment. The staff, empowered and inspired by a culture of continuous improvement, decided that they would do something. They designated the first 4 spots immediately in front of the dialysis unit for use by dialysis patients only. They had special parking signs made, and they gave the dialysis patients special parking passes to use. The impact on patient satisfaction was incredible. The positive response from patients and their families was incredible. There was no financial impact here, but they listened to the voice of their customer. They eliminated that needless movement across a parking lot and had a big impact on the patient experience. So, remember that $1 billion I talked about at the beginning? How did $1 million show up on Enoch Hoffenmeyer's year-end financial statements? Well, when he started to examine his revenue streams, he realized and noticed that there was a sharp increase in revenues attributed to IVs that started at the beginning of the year and continued on through the rest of the year. When he dug deeper, he discovered why. The coders who were coding invoices for reimbursement noticed and felt that there may be some errors in the recording of the start and stop times on IVs. Working with the nurses, they found the error in the process and corrected it. And in the first month, billed an additional $80,000. Because the expenses were all properly reported, this represented $80,000 of previously unbilled profit, which over the course of a year resulted in an accumulation of $1 million. The stories I've shared with you this morning are typical stories and examples of what happens when we make the commitment to become lean. But to do that, we have to change our culture and we have to change our way of thinking. Albert Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems by using the same thinking we used when we created them. When we make a commitment to become lean, we notice an immediate change in the culture of our organizations. Everyone is empowered to look at processes, to eliminate waste, and to create a culture of continuous improvement for the benefit of the organization and its customers and its employees. So now that you know the benefits of lean and the value of having a culture of continuous improvement, what's preventing you from making miracles happen in your organization? So, what's your $1 million question? Is it how to save time and improve processes? Is it how to increase your patient or customer satisfaction? Is it how to save some money? Is it how to engage your staff? Is it how to hold your staff accountable? No matter what your question, lean is your $1 million answer.
Alrighty, if we could get the lights on, please. There we go. I've come out of the dark for Kim and for Laverne. So that, folks, was my live presentation. So how did all of this start? let me talk a little bit first about the accredited speaker program for those of you that aren't familiar with the structure, and this will help you put it into better perspective. The rules state that in the level 1, you have to send in a videotape of a presentation that is between 20 and 45 minutes. That presentation is judged. That is changing, by the way, to 20 minutes to 60 minutes, which, to be quite honest, in today's world is reality. No one has ever hired me for 20 minutes. I've done hour keynotes, yes, but 20 minutes, let's get real. And even 45 minutes, it's such an artificial number. So the way I actually got my 45-minute video was I do a program called Introduction to Lean. And I was working in a hospital, and I had to do it 13 times in a day and a half. So on the one day, we had a videographer there who taped me all day. He taped, I think, 8 or 9 sessions. And what I did was I cut out the questions so that we went exactly about 44 minutes, tape cut. And then I went, does anyone have any questions? Because normally I would do that as part of my presentation, but you go over the hour and you fail. Accredited speaker is not, oh, Greg, you did such a great job. You know, maybe improve this and maybe improve that. No, you pass or you fail. I know that for a fact because I failed 3 times. So and I remember, so we had all of these tapes and I didn't know which one to submit. So I asked the video guy, which one was the best? He said number 5 by far. So we sent in number 5. I was fortunate to finally pass level 1. And how did I get past level 1? When I was trying for it previously, you know, everybody thinks that you have to be this big motivational speaker and do all this cool stuff. But Greg Wood sat down with me and he said, here's your problem. You're not being yourself. Do what you do. Do what you do for a living. That's what you do. Send that in. And that to me was the revelation. You don't have to be this motivational speaker. If you talk on technology, talk on technology. If you're a motivational speaker, be a motivational speaker. If you talk on bullying, talk about bullying. You know, you can see my colleagues who passed. Greg, I forget what Greg, I didn't really see Greg because I was in a whole different world by the time I finished. But Paul, one of the last speakers, talked about autism. So talk what you talk about. So that to me was a revelation, and that finally got me past level 1. So when I got past level 1, they sent me this really nice letter, and they said, okay, this is really cool. We're inviting you to speak at the International Convention in Denver. But what you have to do now is you have to take your 45-minute keynote and shrink it down to 16 to 18 minutes. Now what do you do? And this is where it got dicey. And I got to be honest, and so I sat down, and the first thing I did was, what did I actually say? So I sent the video to a transcriptionist, and I had it transcribed. Because it doesn't matter if you even watch this, if I watch my tape, I heard what I think I said, but your mind interprets it. You send this to a transcriptionist, she puts everything, every sound she hears, she puts it down. So I got this back. I'll be honest with you, I was rather amazed that I passed. Because again, you don't realize what you do until you actually see it on paper. So I started to take this and I said, okay, I need to start to synthesize this down to a shorter speech. So I started to synthesize this. Now, the 45-minute keynote, because it's for a client and it's introduction to lean, we talk a lot about lean, but we also talk about how we're going to implement lean and some of the things that we're going to do. So I, again, tried to condense all of this down into 15 minutes, and I was trying, and then I went for coffee with Greg Wood, which I do fairly frequently, and he asked me the question again. You need insight because you work on something for so long, you think it's perfect, but it's not. And it's other people's insight. You got to get people you trust. He said to me, are you teaching or are you selling? Great question, because I was trying to do both. So I said, what the heck? If you're going to do a tape, make something you can use in a marketing piece. Let's sell. But seriously, if you're going to spend a lot of time on a piece of work, you might as well have a dual purpose. This will be going up on my LinkedIn and will actually be the introduction to my video program. So, okay, so now we know that we had to sell. So that changed everything. Now, when you're selling and when you're doing a keynote, this is something really important. You heard a lot of stories. How many of those stories did I actually figure in? None. Because you never brag about what you do. You brag about what the client did. And in the opening, I said, these are clients that I have worked with in small critical access hospitals. So you always want to brag about the client and the clients you've worked with. People will connect the dots because all they're going to hear is what's in that content. So we started to work on the content. So we got so I started to write this, and the opening line was, Enoch Hoffenmeyer is the chief financial officer of a small 15-bed critical access hospital in Southern Illinois. You would not believe the pushback I got on the name Enoch Hoffenmeyer. Everybody told me to crash it. Now, I had a team together. Greg was on my team. Barbara was on my team. Susan was on my team. Kim was on my team. And Kim will also help me edit my speech. And without her, none of this would have happened because she's incredible to be able to look at something and say, this makes sense or it doesn't make sense. You need to move it. It doesn't flow. Tremendous. So thank you again, Kim. So, but I like Enoch Hoffenmeyer. Why? Because it's a really bizarre name. He doesn't exist. But if I would have said, Fred Jones, who cares? You would, because the first thing I know, probably all of your minds, you went, Enoch Hoffenmeyer, that's a dorky name. But what's the old adage, right? You got to, at the end, you got to go back to the beginning. So you got to make it memorable. So I figured if I did that, I would be okay. You would remember at the end when I said, remember about that $1 million that Enoch Hoffenmeyer, and you went, oh yeah, the $1 million. What happened there? Again, to pull this thing together. We had a lot of discussion too, because in the opening, I talked about Enoch Hoffenmeyer and his $1 million. And by the way, his name was changed. Carolyn Marlott is a materials management, now retired, who did save $350,000. And there was a phlebotomist, but his name was not Harry Seldon. Does anyone know who Harry Seldon is? Oh, you people should be ashamed of yourselves. No science, no sci-fi fans here. No Isaac Asimov. Harry Seldon was the formulated psychohistory, which predicts the future of the universe. Anyway, never mind. I just figured maybe somebody will ring a bell for so. I just made it up. The story is true, but I made it up. But I went from $1 million to $350 to $12 grand. We had a lot of discussion around that too. People said to me, "You need to build it up. You need to go from 12 to $1 million." But if I would have started with Harry Seldon and saved $12,000, you would have said, "Who cares?" Right? You got to grab attention at the opening. So I opened with the $1 million. I cut it down to $350,000, and then I cut it down to 12 grand. So the other important thing here is when I was constructing this that I was thinking of was, so the first thing's going to happen when you hear $1 million and you hear $350,000, you're going to imagine an organization the size of the Health Sciences Center or St. B, right? So you have to contextualize this because you've forgotten already that Enoch Hoffenmeyer works at a small critical access hospital, no more than 25 beds, which is why when I got the 3 examples, I repeated that. I know we had discussions about this, but it was really important again to emphasize that. Why? It really didn't matter for the AS. I'll be bluntly honest. But if you were speaking at a healthcare conference, so you got the little guys, the small hospitals, and that's my market, are sitting there saying, well, I can't save $1 million. I mean, you got a big tertiary hospital for that. But if I say, again, remind people that this happened in critical access hospitals, these guys start to listen very, very carefully. So it's about grabbing your audience and holding your audience. So that was the logic behind my opening. From there, we went to, so what really is lean? So we did the lean, we did the little funny shtick, right? You know, if you think it's a weight loss program, you've come to the wrong room. You've got to add some humor into everything that you do. But this is tough stuff to make funny. So we were desperately trying to do whatever we had to do. So we went in, we talked about lean. We talked about where it came from. We gave a little bit of history. We wanted to get some audience participation because that's important too. So what did Henry Ford invent, right? You hear the car, you hear the assembly line, no, the moving assembly line. So we got that. So again, we got a little bit of audience participation. The Piggly Wiggly story is true. My wife loves Piggly Wiggly. We were at a wedding in Nashville at Easter, and across the street was Piggly Wiggly. You'd think my wife walked through the pearly gates. Anyway, sweetie, I love you because she's probably going to watch this. But we wanted again to, the Piggly Wiggly thing about picking groceries. So it was very interesting because again, you've got to put a team together to help you. You have to listen to your team. You also have to listen to yourself. Because when I was practicing, I said this, they allowed you to pick your groceries. And guess who? Mr. Wood said, that's not right. He says, you've got to go like this. Because from the audience perspective, now you're taking something off the shelf. This is taking a ticket. So again, some logic around what's the stage movement. So that was very important to turn to the side. Again, always have to think, what's the audience going to see when we do this? So we did the Piggly Wiggly thing. And then now you've got Henry Ford, you got Piggly Wiggly. How does this relate to healthcare? How does a moving assembly line and self-service groceries relate to healthcare? So that's why I went into, okay, let's talk about how can we make the connection? We'll make the connection on an emergency room visit. Everybody knows about emergency room visits. And how can we give it that sense of movement? So again, we thought about it. Greg was a huge help with me for this. We said, okay, we go here and let's just go like this across the stage. Every step, a separate step. People will get the idea because in an assembly line, the part comes, you do the part moves on, more work comes. So we wanted to get the idea of the assembly line around stage. It got me to one side of the stage. And then to impact is that at each step, value is added by the people who were doing the work. So we really wanted to emphasize that. So very, very careful movement. One thing that drives me crazy about Toastmasters is you've got to move around. And some people give speeches like they're jackrabbits being chased by a dog. They're running back and forth across the stage because they're scared that an evaluator is going to say, oh, you've got to move. No, you don't. You got to move with purpose. You have to have a reason for moving. You see, I stood in one spot for quite a bit. I moved when I wanted to do emphasis. I moved when I wanted to get that motion in people's minds. So again, movement is important, but you've got to be careful for movement. So then I got to the bit about if you ever sat in a waiting room, that's waste. What happened then? Do you remember? I forgot my speech.
I remember, because I went,
and I went, oops, it's not what I thought, but I'm going to use that for the tape. I just failed. It's the first thing that went through my mind. Because this is a speech contest, you're out the door. It's not a speech contest. It's professional speaking. And guess what, folks? Professional speakers sometimes forget what they're going to say. It's not that you forget, it's how you recover. That's what counts. So, I got lost. Too bad. It was a great line. However,
what was the line?
The line was, in healthcare today, we are stretched as far as we can go. There are no more budgets to cut. There are no more expenses to control, and productivity is at an all-time high. The only thing we can do is work better to eliminate waste, improve processes, and create a culture of continuous improvement by unlocking the potential that lean gives us. Yeah, thanks, Judy. It's a good line. It's a wonderful line, but well, when it's gone, folks, it's gonzo, and there's nothing you can do about it. Except you've got this great big Horkin clock in front of the stage. And I mean, it's a big clock. This thing is literally about yay big. Greg, it's huge, and it's ticking. So if you go under or you go over, are you going to pass? Because if you think in terms, DTS, which stands for don't time me, which is another reason I never want to get one. In a speech contest, you're eliminated if you exceed your times. This is professional speaking. The worst sin that you can do is to go over time if you're speaking, especially at a conference, because you'll screw up the whole conference. So one of the things you have to think, everything here is a test. So the time factor is a test. Right? And I was worried that I would be short because I knew I forgot something, but I didn't know how much I forgot. So I was watching that clock. Boy, that's why I really slowed down at the end.
and you can see him. You watch it again, watch him look down the clock.
Yeah, I look down there.
Like, come on, you're not moving.
Yeah. Has that thing got power? change the battery for God's sake. Anyway, but again, everything is a test because they want to see how you act as a professional speaker. And professionals stay on time because that's what you have to do. Anyway, so we got through that. Then we started talking about waste because Lean is all about eliminating waste. We talked about waste. We gave that Burbeck that 50%, the level of waste in U.S. healthcare is 50%. If you're a healthcare executive, that will stun you. Again, that's why I repeated the 50%. We really wanted to shock people because the whole idea of this speech is for somebody to come after and say, give me your card, we need to talk. And you just say, well, I have a contract here, just sign this and I'll be there next week. So we wanted to talk about, so when we established the level of waste, let's give some examples of waste and what people could do. So we talked about the client nurse in Kansas with the on-call list. Excuse me. And then we talked about radiology. So when we were originally putting this together, I thought, wouldn't it be funny if I got a hospital gown and actually put it on, right? Because the back's open. So you could go like this, you could say, am I going to radiology or the ICU? It's a bad joke, but some of you laughed, right? So, but then we thought we started to think. You really got to think. You got to look at everything. Where does the hospital gown go on stage? How am I going to get rid of it? If it's on stage, are people going to constantly be looking at that to wonder what? First of all, before I use it, what is that and why is it there? And afterwards, is he going to use that again? It's not like a magician. A magician has a box or something, you finished your trick and poof, it's gone, right? And it's not that he's vanishing it. He just wants to get it out of your mind when he moves on to the next one. Yeah, that's a very technical magic term, dump box. I don't know if that's quite appropriate to speaking. So it was a lot of struggle with this. I actually borrowed from a client a 4XXX hospital gown and had it with me. But excuse me, I decided not to use it because again, it's just too much trouble. And sure as God made little green apples, if something goes wrong with a prop, now how do you recover? What do you do? So he's like, no, we'll just pretend to put it on, do the funny look, and away we go. So then we talked about the apparatus feeling like it was a piece of sheet steel that just came out of a deep freezer, and that they contorted you. Well, what you didn't see, because the camera didn't go down long enough, I'm a crazy sock guy, and I wear the craziest socks that I own. My wife does not approve of them, but that's not my problem. On the evaluations, which I'll share with you, 2 judges commented on my socks. What's the lesson? The lesson is they notice everything. They notice if you've got one pocket of your jacket tucked in and the other tucked out. They notice if your shoes aren't shined, if your tie isn't straight, if it's not perfect, and that can cost you points. The judges see everything. Because when I saw that, I said, this is insane. What's this guy got in case, clown socks? Because they're actually wilder than the socks I wore when I was clowning. And it's all about what people notice. And we forget about that. If we want to be professionals, we have to look and act professional on that stage because we are being judged. And remember, this isn't, you did a good job, it's pass or fail. And sometimes you don't know why they failed you because they don't have to explain it. I have my evaluation forms. If you'd like to see them, I will pass them around later. I think you'll be surprised. All right. So then we talked about the radiology. So that was the radiology guys. And then we talked about the dialysis unit. Again, no sort of humor there. We talked about dialysis unit. And again, we talked, so because I wanted to make it clear to people that Lean is not just about saving time and money, but it's about patient satisfaction and what we can do for patients. So that's why I talked about that dialysis unit. And the line was, there was no financial impact, but the impact on patient satisfaction was incredible. They listened to the voice of the customer, respected their wishes, eliminated unnecessary movement on the patient's behalf, and had a major impact on the patient's experience. So we really wanted to emphasize that. Then I wanted to go back to the beginning. So I said, Remember that $1 million I spoke about at the beginning? And people kind of Myers financial statements, and everybody went by that dorky name he talked about at the beginning, which is why I used it against most people's advice. So we talked about the process again that the client went through to discover the error and what the client did. It's really important to remember that if you're giving a keynote and you're doing stories, you are never the hero. The client is always the hero. If anything, you're the villain. Like I tell my clients, when people complain about doing stuff, blame everything on me. Because that's what I get paid for. I'm the bad guy. You are the good guys. So we talked about this. We talked about how that $1 million showed up. And by the way, if you want documentary proof, I can get the documentary proof that they saved. They had $1 million that they didn't budget for at the end of the year. Boy, were they happy. And then we talked to then to sort of wrap it up. We talked about to wrap it up, to take a little bit of credit, right? Because you want to shine the spotlight back on yourselves, because what you want is people asking you for your business card and your phone number. All of these stories I've shared with you today are typical examples of the changes we experience when we become lean, when we change our culture, not me, not we. We had the Einstein quote, which I really love. And then the closing challenge to people to say, so what's your $1 million question? Is it this, or this, or this? Whatever your question is, lean is your $1 million answer. So again, to invoke action on the audience's part to call me. So that's the keynote, a bit of the anatomy to let you know we did 7 versions of this keynote before I got on stage. It was a writing process that was incredible. I guess many of you know that I am a speech contest junkie. I've lost a lot of speech contests, and I'm proud to say I've lost at every single level in the international speech contest. What you have to do, if you're really serious about this, is you have to apply what I call speech contest discipline. And speech contest discipline is about sitting down, writing it out, editing the heck of it, putting a team of people together that you trust, working with them, but listening to yourself as well, because you've got to be true. I tell people when I do facilitation skills, when you're on stage, you're at the pointy end of the stick. It doesn't matter what anybody else tells you. If you're not comfortable in your own shoes up here, it never becomes about your audience. So you've got to be true to yourself, but you really have to be disciplined. There are 1,944 words in my speech because I had a word counter on all the time when I was writing and editing. Why? Because years ago, I was in a speech contest. God, this is 20 years ago probably now. And it was the year Tony Berkovic won. For those of you that remember our dear late friend Tony, it was very sad. Tony was a great guy. But it was the year he won, and I was in the district contest. And somebody came up to me afterwards and said, I loved your speech. You spoke a little quickly. How many words? And I said, I don't know. He said, I figure 1,100. I said, okay, that's cool. So I went home that night, pulled it up on the word processor, said, how many words to word count? And word count said 1,102. I'm sold. So how do you write so that you can pace? So what I did was a very informal study of folks that had won either the district speech contest or the regional or the district humor contest or regional contest. So I wanted no lower than a district level winner. And I asked 2 questions. What is the number of words in your speech? And the average time of delivery. And I discovered that no matter what the genre was, the average delivery time was between 121 and 123 words a minute. So when I write to 120 words a minute. That's how I create. My speech was a little, I could have used another 120, 150 words, probably would have been okay. If I wouldn't have forgot that dang sentence, I would have been fine. But you really have to apply that, and you constantly have to massage this. You constantly have to wordsmith this because it doesn't have to be perfect. Daniel Lamont, when he was here, the great world champion public speaking, accredited speaker, said to us, there's a difference between the world championship of public speaking and professional speaking. In the World Championship, it has to be perfect, otherwise you're out. If you're 100% letter perfect when you're on the big stage as a speaker, you'll be judged a phony, because we all make mistakes. And I know this is going to horrify my Toastmasters audience, and I hope you can sleep tonight after you've heard this. But folks, occasionally we all say and ah. Take it easy, Jenny. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know. I apologize. I apologize.
Now that does not mean that you have to sound like Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, but you don't have to sound like the politicians or worse, a hockey player.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to go there. Anyway, but you really have to apply that. So as you're preparing for your keynotes as part of your journey along pathways, you keep, again, you can do what you want with my ideas, but this is just what I did. Because, the really important thing that you want to do a really good job on that 20-minute speech is that that's the minimum requirement for a taped, paid speech for your accredited speaker designation. So there's no sense wasting your time. You might as well start to work towards that. And even maybe it's not good enough or you can't sell it. The experience that it gives you will boost your confidence and boost your abilities. You'll know what to do. I want to talk a little bit about the introduction. I was torn. The introduction that I used, the bit about four airline frequent flyer clubs, 3 hotel reward programs, 2 car rentals, and it's either Costco or Sam's Club, depending on where I am, because sometimes there's no Costco, but there's a Sam's Club. It always gets a laugh. And I didn't know whether or not I should use it. Should I introduce this bit of humor in or not? So I said, what the heck, let's try it. So I put it in, and I was really grateful that the introducer came to us beforehand with our introductions, and he wanted to be coached on how to deliver it. So because sometimes the introducer will take it and he'll go like this. Enoch Hoffenmeyer is the Chief Financial Officer. Please help me welcome Greg Wood. Right? But it's true, right? Because, they think they're experts. Really bad with Toastmasters. But he was very coachable. So I coached him. I showed him where to pause. I showed him where the humor hit was, where he was going to get his laugh. So he said, okay, I could do this. And he did a fabulous job. And the introduction is really important. You have to set yourself up as the expert in your field and somehow introduce a little bit of element of humor to say, hey, just because I'm going to talk about this technical stuff doesn't mean we're not going to have any fun. He came to me after and said to me, he said, not that it matters, but you definitely had the best introduction of all 6 this morning. And you could hear the audience was laughing, right? So I had the audience engaged, because you want to engage the audience as early as you can. And the introduction is really important, that you engage the audience. You give them an idea of what you're going to be talking about. You give them an idea of what your expertise is, because that's your brag, not in your speech, but in your intro. Because somebody else is reading your words. But everybody thinks they made it up on the back of an envelope, because that's what everybody does when they're asked to do introductions, right? Write your own introduction. Make sure that you coach people. I used to use a line called, he ranges from the inspirational to the irreverent. And if you don't coach people, you will get from the inspirational to the irrelevant. Yeah, I know. No, really, I want to go. No, we haven't got time. I'll read it. Toby, I'll be okay. The inspirational to the irrelevant. And of course, the weird look on his face, the audience went crazy. And I said, all right, I'm going to have a really good morning with this group. Excuse me. But the introduction is really, really important. And I can't overemphasize that, because you have to look at everything. So if you're thinking of doing this 20-minute keynote, write an introduction. Your club might balk at saying, just tell them, read it the way I wrote it. The other important thing is you always want to make sure they do exactly that. Let me tell you another story. Years ago, I was applying for the accredited speaker designation in the old days when all you had to have was an audio recording. I did a what was it? I think it was called Humor and Sanity in the Government Workplace. 45 minutes of how to survive working if you work for the government. It had a good crowd. It was very funny, very engaged. You could really see there was a lot of energy. We knew the tape was going to be a barn burner and a winner, except here's what happened. I gave the introduction to a Toastmaster. She said, I will introduce you because I know what I'm doing. I'm a Toastmaster too. And I said, fabulous. Read it exactly the way I wrote it. She said, not a problem. She nails it. Except she says, please help me welcome, you ready? A fellow Toastmaster, Michael Bayer, and I got rejected because I could not prove it was a non-Toastmasters audience. Stuff happens. Very careful what you do. Very careful so you don't, again, it killed me because it was a really good tape. But because of those 3 words, I was disqualified. So I've been talking for way too long. Does anyone here have any questions for me?
Mike, how do you feel between when you left this room and the first time you did it without your notes and did eventually get your AF?
Well, that's a great question, Warren. I don't know how to answer that. You know, I did a lot of rehearsals that were script rehearsals. Excuse me, I traveled a lot. On the same day, I did a script rehearsal in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and Sioux City, Nebraska. Didn't realize they were 90 miles apart. But I was doing script rehearsals because you've got to get the script down first. You've got to have something to say. So I was doing the script rehearsals because I was still doing a lot of editing. And finally, I got to the point was, you know, so far ahead of the presentation, you have to cut it off. So we cut it off. No more changes. That's it. Straight practice now. So it's all about now the delivery, movement, and everything else. I got to be honest. When I walked off stage, I didn't think I was going to get it. I really didn't think I passed because I knew I made a flub. I knew it was kind of obvious if people were paying attention, and the judges do. And I really didn't think I was going to get it. I was fortunate that I didn't have the experience Greg had, because what they've done is with the elimination of the quarterfinals live,
Championship of Public Speaking quarterfinals.
Yeah, he presented Friday night and got a phone call Saturday morning to show up in a suit. We were finished about 11:30-ish. And we had an appointment with the chief, a confidential appointment with the chief judge at 1 o'clock. So all I didn't do was eat lunch.
I did not sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$50 that I didn't eat lunch. But then I found out I got it, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe when Dilip told me, he handed me my evals. He said, "Congratulations! I don't know what to tell you. You got it." And I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know, and I was just elated. But you can't tell anybody. Right? So, you know, the 6 of us kind of huddled and we all patted each other on the back. I phoned Barbara, I phoned Greg, and Cheryl Roush came and said, "Did you get it?" I said, "Well, I can't tell you that." I said, "It's confidential." You know, if I tell you, you think I'm blabbling all over the place.
We were there.
You guys didn't know. And
You left.
but I can't, there's no way on God's green earth I could keep a straight face for a day and a half with you and Laverne and, you know, so I said, that's it. So I left. I left the hotel and I went back to my hotel because I didn't stay there. The Bombers were on TV in Denver, right? The Bombers, Friday night CFL football. Perfect. Ordered a pizza, watched the game.
That's back when they were playing football.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so and then I came back I came back Saturday morning late-ish because again, you can't tell anybody. And they announced it at the World Championship of Public Speaking is where they make the announcements. I think you probably figured it out when you saw when you saw us sitting at the front row. I think you guys had it figured out by then. But technically we didn't tell you, and it was very hard to keep a straight face. I just figured I got to take off. But I was worried that I didn't get it. I figured, you know, I probably have to go to Paris next year and do it again. Fortunately.
I have a question about delivery and content. Now, there's always a balance when you're doing a keynote or any speech about having your content and the delivery. So in your mind, now that you've actually have a credited speaker, what is the balance between the delivery and the content?
That's easy to answer. People don't pay you for delivery. People pay you for content. People pay you for expertise. Stephen Covey, who, you know, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, brilliant book. Anybody ever hear him speak?
No.
Okay, please watch Water Evaporate, because that's more, Covey was not a great speaker. He had great content, but he really wasn't a great speaker. So people pay for content. So you worry more about your content and then about your delivery. And if you're passionate about what you're doing, if you do what you do, which was my mistake, you're passionate about it. And your delivery comes. You get excited about it. You want to tell people all this cool stuff, right? So your delivery comes, but content is the king, because that's what people pay for in the real world.
I'm just curious about a really potentially small detail. A couple of times, and maybe this is just because you knew that you just fit or just trying to get into it, but you look like you could do with a sickle wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, on something like this, where you are trying to get the accredited speaker, where there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of things that they're looking at. Something, if you're going to make the stage your own, so if you had water somewhere so that you get it, I mean, all that stuff I would think would be showing that you're in control, that you know what you need. How do you think? Do you think that's a reasonable assertion, or do you think that that might be a drawback or a sign of not being?
That's a great question. If you were doing, maybe if you were doing an hour, I could see that maybe you'd want water or something like that, and it would have to be somewhere and, you know, well organized. I felt for 15, 20 minutes, you should be able to do 20 minutes standing up, have the drink before you go on.
Because they're serving
Backstage.
Evian backstage.
There's what?
Evian.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they've got they're nice. They got stuff for the speakers backstage. So, but
No
again,
whiskey though.
yeah, no booze.
Just saying.
I probably would have forgotten a lot more than that one sentence. But again, it's all about who you are and what you do. And if you do it right, it's not a detriment. If you go to the water constantly drinking because you're trying to figure out what you're going to say, you know, your audience will figure you out much quicker than you think, and they'll know whether or not you really are the expert or if you're trying to fake it. I wouldn't do it in a speech contest. Because if nothing else, you don't have time. In a 7-minute speech, you don't have time to take a drink of water. You're losing too much valuable time.
Just another comment. Like, I was actually watching Michael, and I did see the socks, and I wondered how the socks are adding to the story. Because really, when you're up there, yeah, they didn't add to the story, and they could have been distracting. But nevertheless,
To the men.
choice to
Yeah,
wear.
to the men. But to women, I think that, because the comments I get from women, I love those socks. I wish my husband would wear them. I can't get my husband to wear them, right? So, hey, ladies, you know, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, all right?
But I don't know that I would chance it in such a way.
It's not a chance. It's a fashion choice.
Did you see my shoes last year?
You see his shoes? Yeah.
Those
And,
shoes, Cheryl Roche says my shoes was the reason I got my.
yeah.
But she thinks I suck, so yeah, no.
And the other comment is around the bin. I like having an actual gown, and then if you had a hospital bin, would that not work? Right? Because when you're taking it off, where does that gown go?
Okay, but then
Goes in the
again,
bin. But then you need time for that.
well, but
Right?
you can
So
build
you
that
have
in.
time.
But then you're going to look at it from the audience perspective. So you got a guy in a suit, he's doing his thing, he puts on, and he's got this ugly bin that everybody knows are the soil, bacteria impregnated clothes on stage.
They're hospital people.
Because they're hospital people, right? And they're going, oh my God, infection control, where are you? So again, it's you know, we tried it 17 different ways how we could make it work, and we just figured, you know what, that wasn't worth the risk. And then your stage is cluttered.
What about slides? You just, what was your decision on slides?
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
Since we're on this topic of
Yeah.
what could go wrong.
Originally, I was going to use PowerPoint slides, just to walk through it very quickly. It's nice. You can use them use your teleprompter, the whole 9 yards. And I decided against using slides because when I got away from teaching, because teaching I need them, when I'm doing selling, what here would have a slide would have enhanced? Nothing. So really there was no purpose to do slides, and it's one more technological challenge and something else that can go wrong.
Do most of the slides, or is that something to do?
It was about 50-50 this year, yeah. One gal who didn't make it last year in Greg's year finally got a piano. And if she would have had a piano last year, she would have won, because it was, yeah, she's an unbelievable pianist. And she would have definitely won. She would have definitely got it last year. She brought in a keyboard this year, and I haven't seen her presentation, but I just heard that she blew everybody away with the playing.
Do you not see the other accredited speakers?
Well, here's what they did. Toastmasters, in its infinite wisdom, there was actually one guy who didn't come to Denver because the United States wouldn't allow him to come in, because he's from a Muslim country, so he's going to Paris next year. And there was 6 of us. So what they decided to do was to have 2 flights. So they had the boys in one room and the girls in another room. Welcome to the 50s. Now, and so maybe this was a way to generate more money. So I heard the guy. Oh, I really didn't hear the guy before me or the guy after me, because again, you're in the headspace. But certainly, once in a while you forget what you're going to say.
But the guys and the girls.
But you only had a chance to have.
Yeah, but we only had a chance.
I was in the middle of 3 anyway.
Yeah, I was in the middle of 3. I only saw the guys. We couldn't see the girls. They were in another room.
Same time.
Same time.
Oh, really?
So they had 2 speakers in one room and 4 in the other. Like, could you not have sent one of us over, just again to balance it out? And then there was a lot of controversy from especially my wife saying, well, which flight are you in? Like, which one do I buy?
I'll buy them both.
I don't want to buy them both. Which one do I buy? I would have liked to have heard Sima and what's her name?
I didn't even hear Sima last year because she was right after me.
I heard Sima last year.
But she didn't deserve it, which is why she didn't get it. But the yeah, I did. We were there, and there were 9 of us. And I heard 9 speeches.
Yeah, yours was a marathon, because I live streamed it last year.
And it was really well, Terry was quite a break, so people knew.
Terry was hilarious.
Good, but it was I think it's too long, to hear everybody else. It's nice to hear everybody else, and it was good to look at them and know and realize Greg, who got his this year, and Sima got, they both did not get theirs last year when I was there. I don't know, but Greg, because he didn't do what he did, Greg decided to speak on something else. Because Greg speaks on suicide prevention, and like 2 weeks before, his best friend committed suicide, 2 weeks before we hit the stage.
Yeah.
Greg thought he couldn't do it, couldn't bring himself to go there, so he did another speech that he had, but it's not what he does, so the passion wasn't there, in the same way, and so that's why it's so important to do what you do.
Yeah, but this is very unusual this year that everyone got through. Because I remember backstage, I said, I'm not going to wish anybody luck. It's 6 for 6. That's what we're going to do today. 6 for 6. And
It's not competition.
it's not, and you have to remember too, the AS is not a competition. I don't have to be better than anybody else. I just have to meet the criteria. All right, any other questions before we lose power? I brought mine.
So Vern or Kim, if you're asking something we can't hear you, so turn your screens on to let us know that you're asking a question. Or Kings.
No, I don't think we have any questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any questions.
All right, cool. Well, if nobody has any questions, let's turn this back over to our Toastmaster.
All right. Thank you very much, Michael. We've come to the portion of the meeting. We're going to take a little bit of a break. It says 15 minutes. If we can do 10, then take a break for 10 minutes and come back here at 25.
I was about to click on it.